The Marshall Thundering Herd saw their ups and downs last season. Hey, they had a win against the Power 4 program last season in Virginia Tech, and then things didn't go as well as they would have hoped in conference play. Started out strong, and they sort of tailed off towards the end. However, Marshall still projects to be one of the best teams in the Sun Belt Conference this season if some pieces can fit into place. Is Marshall ready for a potential Sun Belt championship run in 2024? You're about to find out what I think here in this video. What's up, Tailgaters? Here in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to prediction season. Welcome to my channel. Guys, I'm predicting each and every one of the 134 FBS level college football teams this summer. And if you're a fan of a Power 4 team, well, I have a video up on my channel. Every single Power 4 team is done. Guys, I'm doing your favorite team. If you're a fan of one of the group of 5 teams I haven't done yet, you got to hit the subscribe button, got to ring the bell, especially if you're as big of a college football nerd as me. You're going to want to have to hear what I have to say during the season, won't you? And look, just thank you for supporting my channel this summer. The support has been crazy. It's meant a lot to me, and you can help support my channel and by pretty much interacting with it in any way you can. Watching this video is a huge one, and I really appreciate it. Go watch my other videos. Again, we're doing 134 of these videos this prediction seasons with standings videos to come later. Like, comment, share, do anything else you can. Help support the channel. It means a lot to me if you're willing and able to do so. Let's talk about the Herd now in 2024. We're going to take a deep dive into the team's offense, into the defense, and at the end of the day, we'll go through the Marshall schedule and give it a game-by-game preview and prediction. That's how we do predictions around here. Couple things before we do start, though, because right over here are going to be the stats the team put up either offensively or defensively last season. And, of course, for your viewing pleasure, right down there below the team's coaching staff, or I should say right below the team's logo, I have put the team's coaching staff. No more wasted time. Let's talk about the Marshall offense, which, again, overall saw its ups and downs last season. There were some really, really good performers on this offense. We'll talk about one in the running back position here in just a little bit, but you have to start with the most important position on the field. That's the quarterback position, and you are losing, your main primary starter from last season. He goes by the name of Cam Fancher, 2,162 yards, 11 touchdowns, but through the same amount of interceptions as he did touchdowns last season. Again, that number being 11. 273 rush yards and 4 rushing touchdowns for him last season. Sack yardage is included in that and got sacked 27 times. So you lose your primary starter from last season. He has entered the portal. He is now off to FAU. TJ McMahon and Chase Harrison will also be leaving through the transfer portal as well. So you do lose depth in this quarterback room, but you get Cole Pennington back. He is your projected starter into this season. And look, son of an NFL legend, I know, and there are a lot of people that are panicking about him because of what he did last season. So I'll read you the stat line here, but I got to be honest with you, and I'll just say this right off the bat. I really am not concerned about Cole Pennington at the quarterback position as much as some people out there, including even some Marshall fans, might be. Pennington last season had 57% completion percentage, 695 yards, and 112 pass attempts, so already not a great number there, only 6.2 yards per completion, through 6 interceptions, and no touchdowns last season. So that obviously is where the big concern comes in with Cole Pennington. He wasn't producing touchdowns last season coming into this program, what a lot of people thought he was going to do. I still have belief in Cole Pennington. Look, when you are the son of an NFL legend, as his dad is, you're going to have the tools to be able to develop yourself really well. And obviously, he knows what he needs to improve upon, and he's got the necessary resources around him. And Marshall is not like any other, group of 5 program. This is the program that usually is towards the top of the ranks in the group of 5 year in and year out. And they're a really, really competitive team. And they have a history of beating Power 5 teams, Power 4 teams now. But look at what they did last year. I think Cole Pennington is going to be fine. He still has the skill set. He still has everything he needs to have really good success with the Thundering Herd. He'll be backed up this year by a couple transfers. Braylon Braxton comes over, I believe, from Tulsa, while Mitch Griffiths is a Wake Forest transfer. But it's Pennington's starting job to lose. Now, if he continues his play from last year, kind of like the stat line that I just read, yeah, you'll see Braxton and Griffiths get some snaps this season. You probably will anyway. But I have faith in Cole Pennington. I think he's going to end up giving some solid quarterback play for them this season at the very least. And I think the quarterback position, not as big of a worry as some people may be having with Marshall here. We'll run through the skill positions really quickly because I just had to ramble on about Cole Pennington here and just tell you I'm not really concerned. I think he's got a lot of great skill sets, and I think he'll utilize them well. You lose a stud out of the running back room in Rasheen Ali, 1,135 yards, 15 touchdowns last season. You'll see him for good reason playing on Sundays. So your running back room will look like this season. Ethan Payne and A.J. Turner both come back. Your second and third leading rushers among running backs, respectively, although Turner only had 6 carries last season. And you do get a transfer coming over, I believe, from NC State. Yes, that's correct. And Jordan Houston, fairly solid during his time with the Wolfpack. And who knows, he could either sit behind Payne or he may even be the starter in this running back room in 2024. Wide receiver room does lose a couple pieces to the transfer portal. Jaden Harrison is off now to Notre Dame. And you also do lose Caleb Coombs, who is off to Florida Atlantic. You do lose some other guys due to graduation. Caleb McMillan, I believe, has graduated. I couldn't really find any solid evidence on him. All I do know is that he is not on the Marshall roster this season. McMillan last year, 275 yards. I'll go through some other stats here. Harrison was the leading receiver with 410 yards, and Coombs had 310 yards last season. You also do lose Daryl Simmons, however you pronounce that last name, 249 yards for him. So some solid production does leave this Marshall wide receiver room. You do get a couple pretty good get-backs, though, in DeMarcus Harris, who had 396 yards and a touchdown on 24 catches, second on the team last season, and Chuck Montgomery, who was 5th on the team in receiving last year, 269 yards, 3 touchdowns last season. It's a wide receiver room that really just spurted production everywhere, but most of this wide receiver room is built through the transfer portal. They have a ton of guys coming in from everywhere across the country. Christian Fitzpatrick from Michigan State. Tytuan Chapman is coming over from North Carolina. Carl Chester is over from Tulsa. Braylon Brown is over from Ole Miss. You're also getting a guy like Elijah Metcalf over from Middle Tennessee, and there are even more transfers like Ty Perkins coming in from Cincinnati as well, and the tight end room is no different. Yes, you lose Chris Motillo due to graduation. Sean Salas is off through the portal, but you return Cade Conley and Rashad Smith, and Justin Holmes is coming in through the portal. He's a Kent State transfer that will end up playing big minutes in this tight end room. Offensive line, you lose 2 really good ones to the NFL, Dalton Tucker and Ethan Driscoll, and you lose another really good one, Trent Holler, who was off through the transfer portal. I'll tell you where he's going here in a minute. He's going over to play for Memphis. Lloyd Willis and Chinazo Bobby, my apologies, they also enter the portal as well. So again, much like the wide receiver room, it's an offensive line room that's really going to be built through the transfer portal. Jalen Slappy and Logan Aspern do come back, but Bryce Ramsey, Jeremy Jones, Adam Shun Marcus, Elijah Ellis, Cedric Nicely, and Barrett Maddox all enter through the portal. So you're going to have a completely revamped offensive line. And look, the offensive line was not great in its entirety last season. Yes, you lose a lot of very talented pieces, but overall, run game only averaged 3.8 yards, 36 sacks allowed last season. Let's see if some of these portal pieces can improve their offensive line from a season ago. How do all the wide receiver pieces fit? But the biggest question mark with this offense by far is, what do you get out of your quarterback play this season? And more specifically, what do you get out of Cole Pennington this season? I think there's no question that he is the most talented quarterback that is in this room. He's got to prove it. He's got to play a lot better than what he did last season, which I believe he will, but he's got to show it and he's got to prove it for this Marshall offense to take that next step from where they were last season. Again, a lot of things did not go well for the Marshall offense last year, especially towards the end of the season. You want to see improvement from this squad in 2024. You talk about the defensive side of the ball for Marshall, and overall, pretty solid. Yeah, you probably allowed a little too many points, again, especially towards the end of the season, but overall, pretty solid defense for the Thundering Herd last year. They, too, lose a ton of talent from last season. We will start out with the defensive line, where you do lose a guy off to the NFL by the name of Owen Porter. Leading tackler among defensive linemen last year with 62 of them. Also, one of the team leaders in sacks with 5 of them. I believe that places him 3rd on the team from last season. But you do lose your other 2 sack leaders from last season as well. Elijah Alston, my apologies, is off through the transfer portal. 45 tackles, 6 sacks. He was one of the premier defensive linemen that entered the transfer portal this season. You will now see him in a Miami Hurricanes jersey. And then Sam Burton, who had 6.5 sacks last season, has run out of eligibility and graduated. Jaleel Rivera Harvey is also a guy that enters the transfer portal. 16 tackles. He can be a fairly solid player. He has entered the portal and will now be playing for Western Kentucky, a team we just talked about not too long ago. So the defensive front for Marshall looks like this. Mike Green, Ty Legs, Isaiah Gibson, and Chris Thomas. Will they all come back, making for a pretty good defensive line core, but obviously with some pieces you lost to the NFL graduation and through the the portal, you had to dive into the portal yourself to get a couple pieces. Jacarius Clayton is going to be one of those coming over from Mississippi State. Jason Shuford is also coming into the portal, a guy that was not on the R-Lads depth chart, at least the updated version that I have seen, is Will Norman, a guy who is coming over from Florida. He could play some pretty big minutes there as well, but I also do believe that he re-entered the transfer portal, which is I'm pretty sure why he is not on this list. So a guy coming over from Florida that you probably lost there in Will Norman, again, I think is back in the transfer portal, but there are some other pieces you could have mentioned on the defensive line room as well. Elias Neal is gone to the NFL out of the linebacker room. Neal last season, leading tackler, 93 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 pass defended, 2 interceptions for him last season. Steven Nix has entered the transfer portal, 66 tackles, a couple sacks for him, 3rd leading tackler. And Keyshawn Brown, he has run out of eligibility. He has graduated, 36 tackles and 2 sacks last season. So all 3 guys that leave the linebacker room had 2 sacks of production. Lots of good talent leaving the linebacker room. Still got some good ones here, though. Jacorian Anderson, Jaden Yates, and Braden Ward come back, while Ashton Helfin provides some depth through the transfer portal. Defensive back room, let's talk about it. Micah Abraham, you'll see him playing on Sundays for good reason. He was really, really good for this team last season. 36 tackles, 4 interceptions, which led the team. He also led the team in passes defended with 15 of them. Really good stats from Micah Abraham last year. And Deani Hill has entered his name into the portal, 2nd on the team with 10 passes defended and 55 tackles last season. Out of the safety room, you do lose Kerryon Martin, who was a fairly solid producer, again, for this team last season. Let me find a stat line here. 31 tackles for him last season. So again, pretty much everyone you lose off the defensive side contributed some production in more ways, some in more ways than others, but for the most part, a lot of really good players leave this Marshall defense. When you talk about what comes back in the defensive back room, though, Jacoby Henderson, Amari Foster, and Ishmael Ibrahim, he does come back. Again, apologies for the stutter and any mispronunciations if there was one. Isaiah Johnson comes in through the portal, but we're not done there. We got to talk about the safeties. J.J. Roberts, A.J. McGee, Josh Mona, and Daytoni Smith. They all come back while DeJavion Stepney enters through the portal. And kickers are people too. You have to show them some love. John McConnell, I believe primary punter from last season, off through the portal. So Marco Piri and Alec Clark will battle for the punting duties. You'll probably see both of them punt this season, while Reese Verhoff does enter the transfer portal. So when you do take a look at this defensive side of the ball for Marshall in 2024, again, as I said, and I've probably said many times here, a lot of very talented defensive pieces do leave this room. You just lose a ton of excellent and really, really good high caliber defensive players from last season. The defense maybe takes a little bit of a step back this season, but overall, I think you supplemented pretty well through the portal. I think you have some solid players that are already here. I don't know, the stats could look pretty similar for Marshall's defense this season, but the defense in some ways may have to see some improvements from last year, which could be hard, especially with all the talent leaving. I still like a lot of the talent that is here and still feel pretty solidly about this defense for the Thundering Herd entering the 2024 season. Now you got to take a look at the Thundering Herd football schedule, and it looks like this. Any game in green is going to, or no, I should tell you how we categorize the games first. Any game underlined is going to be a home game, while any game on the road is in italics. That's the slanted text. Any game in green is going to be an easy win for the Herd, while any game in yellow is a close fight, a competitive game, but one that I still see the Thundering Herd being able to win, and any game in red is a loss. You start out with the game against Stony Brook that you're going to be able to win in week 1 before you finish out your non-conference, or I should say you get into the meat of your non-conference slate with 2 out-of-conference road games against Power 4 programs, and I think you're going to lose both of them. Yes, Marshall did beat Virginia Tech last season. It started out it was a very good start to the season for the Thundering Herd last year, but Virginia Tech is among the nation's leaders in returning production. You don't get them at home this year. You have to go on the road in Lane Stadium to play it, and Blacksburg is going to be really, really loud. Not only is Virginia Tech going to be looking for revenge, they're going to be better in 2024, and they could potentially push for an ACC championship appearance. Kyron Drones comes back, Bayshul Tootin, a lot of good wide receiver pieces. The defense should be really good this season, and Virginia Tech's going to finish top half, top third, maybe even top quarter of the ACC this season, and that is going to be a win for Virginia Tech, meaning a loss for Marshall. And after your first bye week, I just don't think you're going to go on the road and win in Columbus either. Ohio State's going to be one of the most talented teams in the nation this year. Will Howard comes in through the portal, as does Quinshaw Judkins, Caleb Downs, to couple with the plethora amount of Buckeyes that could have entered the draft and returned this season. Some really good both offensive and defensive players. Marshall loses to the Buckeyes, and they start out 1-2. Actually start out 2-2 through non-conference play. as I think they beat the Western Michigan Broncos. Now, this is a game that I do think you have to watch out for a little bit because I think Western Michigan is going to be a fairly competitive team this season. They proved to be a fairly competitive team last year. Again, I still think they have a lot of very, very nice talent. And overall, I think Western Michigan is going to be able to give Marshall a pretty good fight. Hayden Wolf is that quarterback. He is a former Old Dominion player that has some pretty good weapons around him. Defense is pretty experienced as well. But overall, I see Marshall being the more talented team, especially when Cole Pennington plays at the peak that we all know he can play at. I think Marshall's going to be able to outduel Western Michigan there, and they will be able to win. So they go 2-0 during non-conference home games and 0-2 during non-conference road games. That's how I have Marshall predicted up to this point. You get into conference play the very next week after Western Michigan, and it's a doozy. You probably have to play one of, if not the best team in your conference in the Appalachian State Mountaineers. Yes, App State did lose a lot of talent from last season, most notably the running back in Nate Noel. But Joey Aguilar is still that quarterback there. The wide receiver room is still really, really good, and the defense is going to be solid for App State this season. But Marshall is a team that always hangs around in these kind of games. They're always very, very competitive. And Marshall usually pulls off 1, 2, maybe even 3 wins a year that you probably don't expect them to get. This is the game where I see App State probably being the more talented team, but I think Cole Pennington is going to be able to attack this App State secondary fairly well, and I do think that Marshall's going to be able to rumble to a win here against App State. Now, I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think there are going to be some turnovers. There are going to be some moments where it definitely looks like App State is getting ready to pull away here. I think this is going to be a sloppy game on both sides, but overall, I do think Marshall's going to come away with the win. Again, I still like Cole Pennington. I still like a lot of the defensive pieces that they have. Can the secondary step up and slow down Joey Aguilar in that pass game? That is the big question. I think they do. They force a couple turnovers, and Marshall gets a really crucial win there at home against the App State Mountaineers. But sadly, they do turn around the next week, and I do think lose to the Georgia Southern Golden Eagles. Georgia Southern has got some really good talent on this team as well. Again, coached by Clay Helton. They got, well, some of their offensive line pieces are going to have to change this season. They bring in some pieces through the portal. Dexter Williams will be taking over quarterback there, I believe, formerly from Indiana. I could be wrong on that. I'm just trying to relay things off the top of my head here. Yes, he is from Indiana. I just confirmed that there. Some really good wide receiver pieces. Jalen White comes back. Derwin Burgess as a wide receiver. Jalen White, a running back, by the way. And if Marshall isn't going to be able to slow down App State's offense, I don't know that they're going to have much success against Georgia Southern's offense. Again, Marshall has to play at home against App State, which helps. They have to go on the road to play Georgia Southern, and I think they lose that one. So you start out 3-3 through the first half of this season, but you have some easier games here to help you pick up momentum towards the end of the season. You do get Georgia State on a Thursday at home, and I think that's going to be a pretty easy win. Georgia State lost everybody from last year. That running back, Carroll, their head coach is gone. I believe there's even some overturn at the quarterback position. A lot of really good defensive pieces are gone. And Georgia State, while normally a team that is feisty and can hang around, I think sees their struggles this year. That should be an easy win for Marshall. And after their second bye week, should get a pretty easy win against ULM as well. Probably the lesser, most talented team in the Sun Belt Conference. Here, again, they've had some good seasons here and there, but overall, not much to get excited about with the Warhawks. That's a win for the Thundering Herd. I also think you're going to pick up a win against Southern Miss. They just were not a great team last season, and they lost a ton of talent that could have helped them be a lot better in 2024. Granted, I still think they see their improvements in their own varying ways, but overall, I just think Southern Miss is not going to be that great of a football team this season. They'll give Marshall their struggles here as Marshall has to go on the road to play that one, but I think the Thundering Herd are going to be able to get that win. Now, Coastal Carolina is a very interesting game here. I think Marshall gets the win, but the Chanticleers are going to put up a fight. Look, I know that Grayson McCall is gone. I know that you lose some really good wide receiver targets off this team. Ethan Vasco is going to be taking over at quarterback. I don't think he's going to give you bad quarterback play at all. Braden Bennett is back at running back. Still some solid wide receiver pieces. The defense is going to be loaded with experience. even though, again, it does lose some pretty solid pieces from last season. Coastal Carolina will find a way to hang around and be competitive in the Sun Belt this year, just not with Marshall. Well, okay, yes, they hang around and are competitive with Marshall, but they can't get the win. Marshall improves to 7-3, and you're looking on the cusp of an 8-win season, but you got to go on the road for your final 2 weeks here, and I think they're going to be tough games to pull out either way you slice it. Look, I know Old Dominion usually is a team that people like to pull from the transfer portal, in that they usually have some pretty good talent that does leave that team. But Grant Wilson is coming back at quarterback. You got Aaron Young coming in to be your running back through the portal. Deontay Vines is coming in through the portal. Some really good defensive pieces, especially in that secondary. I mean, they've loaded up through the transfer portal in the secondary. And I just think Old Dominion going to be one of those teams this season that is not going to go down without a fight. They're going to fight. They're going to hang around in pretty much every game they play this year. And I think that they're going to be able to beat the Marshall Thundering Herd this season. I think there are going to be a couple games where Marshall has a letdown. This is one of them, on the road against Old Dominion. Probably still the more talented team, but I think the Monarchs get that one done, and I don't see you beating James Madison on the road. I know a ton of players are gone. I know Kurt Signetti is gone, but James Madison has one of the bright young head coaches in Bob Chesney, ton of talented transfer pieces. They'll be a really good team this year, and Marshall can't get it done on the road, which leads me to 7-5. 8-4 is the other record I could likely see. Cole Pennington has to work out his things. The offensive line has to work out their things, and they got to replace some stars. But if you can do that, you're looking at a pretty good season for Marshall. They'll be one of the better teams in the Sun Belt Conference. Maybe not as good as some Marshall fans would have wanted, but I got 7-5 for the Thundering Herd this season. I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. And I'll see you guys in my next video, where we will talk about, we'll dive back on into the Mountain West, talk about the Aztecs of San Diego State. Goodbye.